Dakota territory, summer of 1885. The wagon moved on without her. Dirt rose within the dry morning light, swirling around the wheels like a veil. 8-year-old Sadie June Lawson stood still in the road, clutching a small package wrapped in ticking fabric. Her eyes tracked the shrinking silhouette of the covered wagon until even its creaks and cracks were swallowed by the wind. Behind her, silence settled like ash. No birds, no breeze, only the tender breath of a child trying not to cry. Her stepmother, Agnes, hadn't said a word, just told her to wait while she tied something down. Then the reins snapped and the wagon rolled away, plan and silent as judgment. Sadie looked down at her feet. One boot was scuffed, the heel torn. Her knees trembled, but she didn't sit. In her bundle, a fabric doll with one button. I peeked out. Leela, stitched by her real mama long ago. The sun climbed. Shadows shrank. Still. She waited. She counted to 100 twice. A buzzard circled overhead. That's when she heard it. Hooves. One horse. A steady gait. She turned slow. A man approached from the ridge above. Broad shoulders, dust-colored coat. Gray in his beard. He didn't rush, didn't call out. When he stopped 10 paces from her, his eyes met her steady, unblinking. You lost? He asked. His voice was dry as mesquite bark. She shook her head. You left behind? This time she didn't answer. The man dismounted, slow and careful, like approaching a wild colt. I'm Caleb Morgan. What's your name? She hesitated. Sadie. He crouched beside her, looking into her face. That's a strong name. And what about her? He nodded toward the package in her arms. She's Leela, Sadie whispered. That a good name, he said. How long you been waiting, Sadie? She blinked. I don't know, he nodded, then stood. Come on, let's get you warm food. And something to drink. She hesitated. Caleb didn't press. He just stood there waiting, like he had all the time in the world. Then she took his hand. Caleb lifted her into the saddle, swung up behind her, and together they rode down the long road where the dust had begun to settle. The sun slid behind a ridge, casting long shadows across the prairie. They moved at a slow pace, Caleb on his horse, Sadie in the saddle ahead of him, Leela the doll tucked safely in her hands. She hadn't said much since they left the trail, but she hadn't tried to run either. The man's voice was calm when he spoke, never loud, never fast. He talked about distant landmarks, told the names of creeks and hills like they were friends he trusted that rise there. He said, we call it Widow's Bluff. Storms catch their breath before crossing it. Sadie listened, not speaking, but her shoulders had loosened just a little. As dusk fell, they reached a low creek, where the water ran cold and smooth over clean stones. Caleb swung off the horse and lifted Sadie down, careful not to spook her. He made a small fire, its light flickering against her face. From his saddlebag, he pulled out a tin of beans and a square of cornbread wrapped in cloth. She watched him pour water into a tin cup and heat it by the flame while he passed her the food. Her hand shook. Take your time, he said. You're safe now. She took a bite, then another. Ate until the tin was clean. Why'd she leave me? She asked, voice barely there. He looked into the fire. Some folks break quiet, others break loud. But most times it's not about the kid. Sadie stared into the flames. Caleb didn't fill the silence when the stars came out. He laid a blanket near the fire and let her curl up beside it. She held Leela to her chest and whispered to the doll like it could answer. Caleb sat by the fire with his hat in his lap, eyes on the darkness beyond. And though she never said so, Sadie slept that night with her hand resting close to his. They arrived just past mid-morning. Juniper Hollow Ranch stretched out like a painting, fence lines curling around golden fields and leaning barns, all tucked beneath the sweep of cottonwood trees. The house sat on a rise, modest, sturdy-boned, with smoke rising from the chimney and the front door left open like it was always waiting for someone. Caleb lifted Sadie from the saddle. She blinked up at the house, squinting in the sunlight. Her boots crunched the dry earth. She didn't move until Caleb did. A woman stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. Caleb. Morgan, what's this? She asked, eyes fixed on the child clinging to the rag doll. This, he said, is Sadie June. The woman's voice softened. Well, hello there, Sadie. I'm Maribel. Sadie clutched Leela tighter, but didn't back away. Maribel nodded once, then turned on her heel. Well, come on then. I expect she's hungry. Due to the message limit, I'll continue formatting the rest in the next message. Here is the continuation and full completion of your beautifully written story with formatting, names changed, and flowing paragraphs. The kitchen smelled like stew and bread. Sadie's eyes widened at the table, real plates, real chairs, sunlight cutting across the floorboards. Maribel passed her a bowl and a spoon. No one asked her questions while she ate. Caleb leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her like a man remembering something he didn't say out loud. After lunch, Maribel led her to the washroom. You can leave your things here. There's a bed upstairs, soft and warm, don't. Worrying about cleaning the doll, she's earned her dust. Sadie glanced at the towel and soap. Maribel didn't press, just smiled and left her be. That night, Sadie lay beneath a quilt stitched with stars. She whispered to Leela beneath the covers. No one shouted, no doors slammed. Just the sound of wind in the eaves and the creak of a house learning a new rhythm. She didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. This place, this house on the rise had made room for her. And it would never be empty again. The days began early. The land expected work, and the people who lived on it knew not to argue. Sadie rose with the sun, boots clumsy on the steps, eyes still half closed, hair tangled, dress wrinkled. But her hands remembered what Caleb taught: how to tie a saddle strap, how to brush down a horse without making it flinch. Firm but gentle, he'd said, laying his hand on hers. Like the wind through wheat, never too much. She read at night beside Maribel, under the oil lamp, lips sounding out the shapes of words. Pioneer, she'd whisper. Prairie, belong. Some days she helped bake bread, flour dusting. Her nose, cheeks streaked with laughter she didn't know she had. She cried once over a broken toy, once when she couldn't write the letter G the right way, and once when she found a blue ribbon in a drawer and didn't know why it made her chest hurt. Maribel never asked what was wrong. She just sat beside her, placed a hand on her back, and let the silence hold steady. One afternoon, while watching Caleb mend a fence, Sadie stood beside him and said, "You don't have to keep me." He didn't look up from the post. I know, she kicked at the dirt, eyes fixed on her shoes. But I'd like to stay. He met her eyes then. Then you will. That night, while clearing dishes, she set down her fork, turned to him in the firelight, and said the word like it had been burning in her mouth for days. Papa. Caleb didn't flinch. He just nodded once and said, okay then, and from that moment neither of them was alone. The day began like any other. Sky the color of polished bone, wine sharp as a file. Chickens scratched in the yard, horses stomped in the paddock. Sadie sat on the porch, carefully braiding her own hair, while Maribel shelled peas by the window. Then came the sound wagon. Wheels, 2 horses, 1 rider in a wide black hat. Another with a bonnet drawn tight. Caleb stepped out, hand resting on the post, not on the gun hanging just inside the door. His face hardened not with fear, but recognition. Elias Varnes climbed down first, dust clinging to his coat like it had nowhere else to go. Agnes stepped out behind him, boots hitting the earth like it offended her. Sadie June Lawson. Elias called, "We've come to take the girl." Sadie froze. She hadn't heard her full name spoken like that in months, not with that cold bite on the end of it. Caleb stayed calm. She lives here now. Elias pulled a paper from his coat. Legal claim, step-parental guardianship. Signed by Judge Tillman Rusk himself. Maribel came out, drying her hands on a cloth. Sadie moved toward her. She ain't property, Maribel said. You don't claim kids like cattle. She belongs with her family. Agnes snapped. She's got one, Caleb replied. But Elias wasn't just greedy, that much was clear. In the way he looked at Sadie. Not with malice, but with a twisted sense of duty, like he believed dragging her back was righteous. I won't let her grow up in a house without law, without her name rightfully bound, he said. I'm not the villain here. Caleb stepped forward. You might think you're doing right. But that girl's voice matters now. All eyes turned to Sadie. She stepped forward just 1 step. Just enough. I'm not going with you, she said. Agnes opened her mouth. But Caleb raised a hand. No more words. He said, "We'll settle this right." With a judge who hasn't sold his name for ink and coin, Elias hesitated, then climbed back onto the wagon bench. "This ain't finished." "No," Caleb agreed, eyes cold. "It's just started." They rode off, and the ranch held still like it was listening. The courthouse was no more than a square room with a flagstone floor and a brass scale that hadn't seen balance in years. But on that day, it held more weight than any gallows. Caleb stood tall, hat in hand, shirt pressed stiff under his coat. Maribel sat with Sadie between them, Leela tucked in the crook of her arm like a quiet reminder of the road she'd walked to get here. Judge Alton Graves presided, a fair man, silver hair, sharp eyes, known to rule by heart as much as law. Elias and Agnes sat across the aisle, parchment in hand, lawyer whispering in their ears. Guardianship, their side said, signed, sealed, but Caleb's voice cut through like a smooth nail through pine. That girl was left, no food, no care, no shelter. She wasn't abandoned by mistake, she was discarded. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Judge Graves looked at Sadie. "You want to stay with the Morgans?" Sadie nodded. "Yes, sir." "Why?" She held Leela tighter. "Because they don't ask me to be anything but myself. And they don't leave. There wasn't a soul in that room who didn't feel it." Graves folded the paper, set it aside. "My ruling is simple," he said. "She stays." Elias made a sound, half sigh, half growl, but Agnes was already rising, her mouth set in stone. Graves added, "And in regard to the question of blood, love is the only claim I recognize today." The gavel fell once. Outside, sun poured like mercy onto the dust. Caleb turned to Maribel. "Let's make it official." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" He took her hands. "I want to marry you. Today, right here." Maribel stared, then smiled. "You sure? This ain't heat stroke." He grinned. "First time in days I'm sure of anything." They wed under the courthouse eaves, with the judge and sheriff as witnesses. Sadie stood close beside Maribel, her small hands clutching the hem of her dress, whispering every vow into memory. When the papers were signed, Caleb kissed Maribel with a gentleness that said family was a choice, not an accident, and from that moment, they belonged to each other by law, by love, by the grace of a little girl who stood her ground. Final part in next message. 6 years later, and Sadie's legacy. Here's the final part of your fully formatted and completed story. 6 years later, Ranch wore the seasons like an old coat, patched in places, weathered, but dependable. Sadie June Morgan was 14 now. She rode like she was born to it, boots firm in the stirrups, braid trailing behind her like a ribbon of fire. She'd read every book in Caleb's, study sometimes aloud for Emma and little Ben, who'd come 2 years after the vows. She helped Maribel bake, now measuring by instinct rather than guesswork. She taught the neighbor's boy to write his name without once making him feel slow. The barn was her chapel. The pasture her school. One spring, when a colt broke free and bolted toward the ravine, she lassoed it clean from the rise. No panic, just calm hands and a quiet whisper to bring it home. She'd grown taller than Maribel, lean as a sapling, steady as the oak behind the house. Her eyes had changed too, still bright, but deeper now, like they remembered everything and forgave most of it. Leela still sat on her shelf, one eye missing, stuffing thin, but Sadie never thought to throw her out. One morning, while mending a torn saddle strap, Sadie looked up and said, "Popper, what would you think about starting a school just for the ranch kids? And others, ones like me." Caleb set down his coffee. "I think you already did," he said. She smiled and wiped her hands on her apron. "Not yet. But I'm going to." Later that day, she walked the fence line with Emma skipping beside her and Ben balanced on her hip. The wind picked up, carrying dust and birdsong and the scent of wildflowers. Maribel watched from the porch. "She's not a child anymore," she said. Caleb nodded. "No, but she always be ours." And the land, which had once only echoed with hoofbeats and whined, now hummed with the sound of a family that had built something stronger than blood. The sun dipped low, casting the fields in amber light as harvest whispered through the grass. Sadie June Morgan stood at the edge of the barn, arms resting on the fence rail, gaze steady beyond the ridgeline. She'd spent the morning writing, the afternoon helping Ben with his letters, and the final art in quiet thought behind her. The ranch moved like a living thing. Emma's laughter from the porch, Maribel humming while folding laundry, the steady creak of the windmill turning with the breeze. Caleb stepped up beside her, sipping his coffee. "You're quiet," he said. "Just thinking," she answered. "About what?" She looked out over the land, then back at him. "About what to build next." He followed her gaze, the wind brushing against his coat. "Something new." She nodded. "A place for others, kids like me." He didn't speak at first, just breathed in the late summer air and nodded. "You've got the heart for it. I've got the home for it," she said, "and the people." Later that evening, as the family gathered on the porch, Sadie stood up. "I want to build something here," she said aloud. "A home, not just for us, for those still out there." Maribel, with Ben in her lap and Emma leaning against her, looked at Caleb. He gave a small nod. "Then we best get to planning," Maribel said that night, in the quiet glow of lamplight. Sadie wrote her thoughts down on paper, not for a school essay or a letter, but for something she could return to. "My name is Sadie June Morgan. I was once left behind, but I was found and loved. And now I will spend my life giving that gift to others, because the world may break us, but real love puts us back together." She signed her name. Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the grass like it had something important to say, and Sadie was ready to listen.